Hello, NASIG attendees. Thank you for joining us for Gotta Catch 'em All, using Article Galaxy Scholar to plug gaps to article access at the University of Arizona. I'm excited to hear from Darius and Cindy at the University of Arizona. If you need closed captioning, those are in the bottom. That's individually set. So if you just hover your mouse over the bottom and zoom, and then you can get your captions with the show captions button at the end. Um, we will have some time at the end for questions, and Darius and Cindy, I'll be happy to help read those to you so you can concentrate on answers. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you again for everyone for coming today. I'm Darius Larry, the Systems and Metadata Librarian at the University of Arizona, and I'm here today with Cindy Elliott. We both are from the Collection Resources Department at the University of Arizona Libraries. Our third panelist, Teresa Hazen, our department head, couldn't be here today, but she sends her regards. And today we're going to talk about AGS and how we've used, and I apologize, Article Galaxy Scholar, AGS from here on out, and how we've used it to kind of pinpoint some of the gaps in our collections and use the tool more as a collection management tool than an interlibrary loan supplement. And hopefully today from this presentation, we're going to be able to show you how this tool can be used to like bridge gaps in your journal article access, how you can use the data that's generated by AGS to make decisions about how you allocate resources, how you purchase journal descriptions, and the disciplinary coverage of your portfolio, and how we used AGS for future subscription and journal subscription decisions.
Thanks, Darius. So it's not news to this audience that library journal subscription rates continually inflate annually, and many library budgets continue to stagnate and struggle to keep up with our increasing costs. There are so many factors involved in this: political, environmental, socioeconomic. Journal discipline can be a factor, the supplier, the package rates, the different kind of negotiation power your library has access to, either individually or via consortia. All of these things can influence our annual journal costs. So package rates may go up by 1 to 4% annually. Individual journal titles can inflate 5 to 7%, we've seen, and we've even seen higher numbers over the years as serial pricing data changes over time. You can see this data reflected in the ALA Library Materials Price Index, which is published annually in the Library and Book Trade Almanac by Information Today. That chapter is, and we'll have references at the end, but it's prices of U.S. and foreign published materials. And then also in the periodicals price survey, which is an annual survey as well, published in Library Journal. Both of these surveys analyze trends in periodical pricing and the impact on library budgets. These surveys highlight the persistent theme that we have around rising prices, outpacing library budgets, and the impact that has on resource allocation for libraries. So you're like, okay, so what does this have to do with it? Well, many libraries like mine cannot absorb these type of annual increases easily, as we are not getting new money from our institutions. And in order to keep up with what researchers and instructors need, we need to find efficiencies in our budgets and look for new ways to acquire content. Because we typically reduce our spending at the U of A libraries by about $500,000 annually from our budget, we have to be creative and find ways to provide this content to users. And so these cuts make it necessary to explore new tools, scalable, low-cost solutions like AGS, to help maintain access to scholarly content without increasing our staff workloads to manage additional tools. So my library also has a lean overall technical services and collection team. So I've heard from many libraries over this conference that's the case for you all as well. So it's important for us to find solutions that don't require as much heavy staffing, if that's an issue for you. And then lastly, we know that faculty and researchers, especially in fast-moving fields like health sciences, want quicker access to unsubscribed content, so making a self-service option like AGS appealing. Researchers want immediate access to articles and will spend their own budgets to pay for articles so they have instant access. So our library has explored AGS as an option to provide this type of access to users who wanted it. So what is AGS? Well, Article Galaxy Scholar is a tool by Research Solutions, formerly known as Reprint's Desk, for on-demand pay-per article access. AGS will sync with your library's current journal subscriptions, and you can also check for open access article options through this tool as well. And you can route a user back to interlibrary loan options. So if a user clicks on our AGS link for an open access title, they'll just be passed through to that article. AGS uses open URL tech to route requests for anything that the library does not subscribe to. So the user has the option to either get the article now through AGS and acquire immediate access, for which then the library is charged an article fee, or the user can bypass AGS and then place an interlibrary loan request to be fulfilled by our resource sharing team, which usually takes about 24 to 48 hours, many times a lot faster than that. The AGS model is flexible, and you can limit the user pool for AGS to certain populations like faculty if you want, or extend it to all users, or just certain journal publisher pools or publication date ranges. You can limit the number of articles that are downloaded per title. So there are many customization options available to suit a wide variety of library case needs, use needs. So why did we choose AGS? So any tool that we acquire for bridging subscription gaps in journals needs to be able to be managed with minimal staffing due to our bandwidth limitations. So currently this tool interface is managed by Darius and I primarily. The tool features automated thresholds and redirects, which were easy to implement, and we needed some flexibility around these options to customize and change the interface language and email responses in case we need to update them during the semester. To date, we haven't had issues with users understanding that article delivery process and how it works, and we've been providing options to users to circle back to library help when needed. AGS can be customized to include or exclude certain publications or user groups or certain publication ranges, which is helpful to have just in case you need to pivot around your funding volatility during the semester, which may be a useful tool. And since we weren't sure when we started exactly how this tool would be used or embraced by researchers. We wanted an option that allowed us to start small and build out and change our customization options with as little risk as possible to scale up or down. All of these options fit our needs that we had at our institution, so that's why we decided to pilot. And what did we want to learn from this pilot? Oh, so many things. So when we decided to try it out, we decided to try it out for a year. We had a lot of questions and curiosity about how this tool might work for us. We wanted to learn a bit more about how the user would interact with AGS. So how often would users use this resource? Would it be primarily health sciences content that users wanted immediate access to, as we know that our health sciences researchers prefer immediate article demand, they have immediate demands for articles, or would it be other disciplinary areas? Would we be able to identify any coverage gaps in collection for specific publishers or disciplines? Was the cost and staffing really scalable, or would it end up being more challenging to mediate than we thought initially? And how much would it end up costing us to use it? How does it work with ILL as a replacement, or was it complementary? How would the billing and invoicing work? Would we spend more than our initial budget and need to cut back? Or would we see, peaks of use or valleys in use? And would the use fluctuate during the semester? And would we finally, I know there's a lot of questions, would we see an average spending pattern emerge in this tool? So these were all unknowns for us that we just wanted to learn more about.
So to give you some insight into how we initially set up our pilot, we wanted to, as Cindy said, focus on a 1-year time frame starting in August 2021. We really wanted to tie it to the academic year so that we could track use as students went through their normal school year, so as we could see if there was any peaks or downtrends to see when people are using the tool. Initially, we budgeted out, $10,000, low risk. We received a discount through Gwilla. So we thought that, we would give this tool a try. We wanted our scope to be very targeted, because like Cindy said, our initial hypothesis was that the majority of people that would use this tool would be those in the health sciences that had a need for immediacy. So we focused on 25 unsubscribed health sciences journals in AGS, which, after looking through our interlibrary loan data, were picked because they have historically high request rates through our interlibrary loan program. So we wanted to see, would that transfer over to AGS. Some other limitations that we put on the articles that users could request through AGS is that they had to be within a 3-year publication window from the most current year. So every year that we moved forward, if we moved forward after this initial year, in this initial scope, we would move up the year 1 year to ensure that, that range stayed in place. We would assess the data monthly just to make sure that there were no irregularities that would pop up, anything like abuse, make sure that no one was, taking advantage of the tool, because again, like low staff overhead, and any major changes that we needed to make to the tool, or major decisions such as changing the scope or changing how we approach the tool, would be made after at the 6-month mark, or at the end of the academic semester, just so that we could use the next semester um, as a comparison to the control data from before we made those changes. For this setup, it was really like a team effort getting it set up. After getting it set up, it's really very light workload for Cindy and I, but we wanted to make sure that everybody that would come into proximity of this tool could explain AGS to our patrons, know how to troubleshoot usage issues if anyone is having issues using the tool, and ensuring that we could like track and review request data, both within the AGS tools ourselves, and working with our resource sharing ILL department to make sure that we could see how exactly AGS was affecting their workflow as well, even though our initial scope wasn't really focused on how this is affecting ILL, but more focusing on how we're meeting user needs. Primarily, our would health sciences users come to AGS. As Cindy said, this is primarily set up through OpenURL. You have to set up a General Electric service link in your discovery layer so that users can get to these articles when they're searching your catalog, or if they're using link out tools in databases like PubMed. We just wanted to make sure that they could get to the link, and it's actually the only way they get to the link. PubMed was our initial target for having the AGS link for users launched from there being able to gain access, because again, we wanted to lean into thinking that health sciences was going to be the discipline that used this the most. An early bug led us to believe that we could use this Google Scholar to kind of open it up to all discipline searches. But Google Scholar has a bug where some things that link to our Article Galaxy Scholar link were not intended, and it was only intended to go to things that we actually have subscribed. So we kind of had to scrap the ideas that we had for Google Scholar, but we did end up moving into other databases that we'll cover later. So let's talk about the data. So after 1 year, there were 2,365 total AGS requests, but only really 50% of them were for journal articles. The reason that only 50% of them were for journal articles was that there was a misconfiguration in the way that we set up our GES link, and that it was showing up on materials such as monographs that were not intended. So AGS was getting a flood of things that was being redirected to interlibrary loan because it could not fulfill things like monographs, and they were not compatible with the AGS system. Of the valid article requests, and by valid we mean those that were of journal articles, journal content, 66% of them were redirected to interlibrary loan, 20% were actually purchased, and 12% was redirected to open access. Oracle Galaxy Scholar, if they see that a user has requested an open access link, does automatically redirect users to the open access link on its hosted page, so we don't have to handle that redirect if they come across an open access article. Um, the first year, subject trends, like we anticipated, 72% of the requests were from health sciences, 17% from humanities and social sciences, and 11% from STEM. Article Galaxy Scholar doesn't really give you a way to kind of track these disciplines yourself. So we had to massage the data by hand and go in and say, oh, that's a health sciences journal, that is a humanities, social sciences, STEM, just to kind of make sure that we were getting the data that we need and we're making sure that it was reaching the audiences that we thought it would reach. 95% of the purchases were health sciences related. Health sciences were in both years that we ran the pilot, very extensive, and accounted for a majority of our purchases. Um, let's talk about some insights and adjustments. So we did decide to extend the pilot past the initial year, and some context that I want to add on to these, oops, I'm sorry, to these numbers is that another reason why we feel that a large amount of our requests were redirected in the first year is because we had a very strict scope with the 25 unpublished journal unsubscribed journals and the three-year publication window. It wasn't really allowing a lot of users to request a lot of material outside of that narrow scope. And leading into this, so we were worried about the number of redirects to interlibrary loan. It seemed very high. So what we did is that we said, we hadn't spent a lot of money. Let's open this up to everything that we don't subscribe to, every piece of journal content that we don't subscribe to and that users cannot access through any means, through whether through CDI, our current CDI and our Primo, or through any of our partners, anything that they cannot access, let's open up content to that. We did go back and we worked on the configuration to make sure that it was really trying to drill down that it was only focusing on journal content. And we still wanted to keep that 3-year range though. We also added the open URL linking to EBSCO databases because they offered a more widespread disciplinary accessibility than PubMed, which is mostly health sciences. We wanted to make sure that users from other disciplines were getting the same opportunities for using the tool and ensuring that if we gave them, and instead of leaning into the health sciences aspect, if we gave other disciplines the same access like we did with PubMed, would they come across AGS more often and use it more often? So going into year 2, we saw a decrease in the number of requests submitted, but we saw an increase in the number that were actual journal articles. We did still have a little bit um, of non-journal items that were coming through that we still had to work on our GES to make sure that they were coming through. But we also realized that the link, if they were coming from a database where this item necessarily wasn't in Primo, it's something that we couldn't edit in our metadata. They were going to submit those requests for things that were non-journal items. And since we were massaging the data, we were willing to, accept that we were going to get things that were like coming through non-journal content. But it's very easy to tell in the AGS data what is not a journal and what is. So of the journal requests, 54% were redirected to the interlibrary loan. So we were happy that that number went down. Our purchases went up, and everything, like I said earlier, everything was open, so our purchases went up, but still the same amount were redirected to open access. As for subject trends, health sciences still remain the dominant driver of AGS usage. They over 90% of all the articles we published again were for health sciences. We did see some gains in STEM, humanities, and social sciences. So, they did go up once we opened up AGS to all unsubscribed journal content. So we do think that as we go forward, we'll see those other disciplines come up in usage. So this is just a snapshot of some of the publisher data, and these were the top journals that were requested through year one and year two. Taylor and Francis is one of the biggest things that were publishers that were requested in year one. They were accounted for 21% of the requests and 25% of purchases. After year one, we did add a package of Taylor and Francis medical journals, which actually decreased the amount of Taylor and Francis journals that we purchased through AGS to 0%. So, it's just going to show that, we were able to, even after year one, make some changes to how we to our journal portfolio to try to address the need that these health sciences users needed, and save us money on our end from singular article requests. Elsevier and Marianne Liebert were pretty steady over the 2 years. Something else that we want to point out here is that theme journals, after we, which were pretty low in year one, after we added the Taylor and Francis journal packages, they started to spike in year two, and they were actually became our highest requested journal publisher in year two, and the highest amount of that we actually bought after we added the Taylor and Francis journal packages. So again, another data point to look into is like, couldn't we add those journals to kind of alleviate the gap that we have for the users that need those things. Going into spending. So we wanted to map this according to the academic year. So if you look at year one, the first 5 months, you can see that, the spend is actually pretty low. We had a very narrow scope in the first 5 months that we have with those 25 journals. And we really weren't getting a lot of spend. This was also like another reason we decided to really open it up after year one, is because like we had barely spent any money of our 10,000 gold, and we kind of want to limit tests. It's like, what if we took all the limits off? How crazy, and I know that sounds insane, but how crazy could people get with the spending if we just let them um, really request what they want? And as you can see in the second half of year two, as users realize that, AGS was more open, AGS was open to more requests, you start to see the spending go up, and start to see in March of year one that we spent way more than the entire first 5 months. You can see that March and April are periods that users are starting to do a lot of papers, users are starting to get into midterms, and those are the things that we're trying to track and see when our heaviest spending is coming in. And as you can see, as we move towards the summer, it starts to go down again. For year one, we were under our 10,000 goal, and we thought that you know even when things opened up, as long as we kept things within that 3-year range, we think that the costs would be manageable. And we decided to, push this on into a second year of data to see what happens. Instead of just limiting it at 10,000 a year, we budgeted for about a 2,000 a month budget, looking at the numbers that we did in year one. So in year two, again, you start to see us starting off very slow, but again, like 2 to 3 times more than year one with the scope opened. In October, you see that we had a huge spend. Again, that's midterm time, but we did have an incident where a user misused the product, and we had to put in some protections. And I guess I should note that we didn't limit users as a whole. We just only made sure that only University of Arizona library, or University of Arizona students, faculty, and staff had access to it. But as that came in, it's very easy to see when a user is misusing something, and we can go in and adjust usage at a user level, and make sure that that misuse doesn't continue. Going into the second half of year two, again, similar numbers as last year. You can see it spike as users get into the midterm and middle of the season. and again, like declining as we go into the summer. We spent double what we spent in year two than year one. Overall, we still think it's a great value, and that the data that we're getting is beneficial in letting us have in-depth conversations about what we're cutting, what we're adding, and how it can benefit users, and making sure that they have access to what they need. And that if we can't get it, we have AGS to kind of bridge the gap of not being able to, get things in a quicker way than interlibrary alone.
So what did we learn from this pilot? So Darius shared with you quite a few things that we learned from this, and we had no idea how it would be used. And we call it a success. And this augmented our existing subscriptions in a number of ways. So the tool proved to alleviate a bit of a pain point that we had with some researchers regarding desire to get immediate access to articles at point of need. We were able to realistically implement and maintain this tool with minimal staff and scale it to fit our changing budgetary needs. We did determine that AGS was complementary to our ILL workflows and didn't compete or replace the ILL option. And working in a collections development management role, what was exciting to me was the insight that the tool provided into user behavior and needs. We were able to pinpoint a little more directly some areas of research that were happening on campus where we were a little thin on resources and higher on researcher activity. It also helped to identify some new areas of research that we're developing and provided the opportunity to share that information with our liaison librarians who could then reach out to researchers in and specific disciplines or departments around these new areas that were emerging. Sometimes you don't know if the area of research is sustained as a long-term grant or project or program, or if it's just something they're working on during a semester and then it will be disbanded, particularly in the health sciences where things change rather quickly. So this can be challenging if you're trying to decide whether or not to subscribe to some expensive journals. So it gave us some new opportunities to dialogue with our campus users to learn more about their needs, and it gave us some insight into usage for other materials like open access materials. So that was interesting to see. And annually, we have a process where we look at our ILL data to see where researcher activity is taking place. And we look at ILL requests for particular titles over the year, and we decide whether we need to consider subscription access to particular titles. And so now we can incorporate similar data from AGS into that process. And the data provided by AGS has helped us to measure our resource trends a bit more. So now we can include both of those resources data into our decision-making process for serial acquisitions. We were able to keep the cost contained to what we wanted to spend, and we were able to see patterns emerge with the uses, as Darius mentioned. We were able to determine that based on our current usage patterns, we could allocate an average amount monthly, which for us ended up being about $2K, $2,000, and that ebbs and flows over the semester, as you saw, but towards the end of the year, it averages out. And this data helped tremendously with knowing how much we needed to allocate for our budget. And the flexibility of the tool allows us for additional cost containment as needed. So yay.
So I do want to mention some limitations that we did see with using this tool. Um, and that is revolving around seeing things that are really sent to interlibrary alone in the AGS data. It kind of breaks it down into three different areas: those things that were sent to interlibrary alone or redirected interlibrary alone, those things that were purchased, and those things that went to open access. And we looked into ways after the first semester, looked into really drilling down in the AGS data and trying to find some relations with the with our interlibrary loan data in Iliad. And really, we decided to leave that data out because we just couldn't find 100% ties to that data, that even though we had a timestamp and the same article was requested interlibrary loan, we didn't think it was close enough to say that 100% that it was because of a reroute from Oracle Galaxy Scholar. So we're thinking that if we could somehow find a way to link the interlibrary loan data, it would definitely give us a lot more demographic data to use, particularly, is it faculty, is it grad students, is it undergrads, who's using this tool the most and who's requesting these things. And it would, allow us to be, have a more robust data set. And really, when we were working on this, they now have an open form option or blank form option. Really, it was dependent on users being able to get to the open URL option that was set up through a GES in our Prima discovery layer, whether from a database or searching our catalog, to be able to request the items that we need. But they now have an open form option. But when we were doing this project, that wasn't an option. And I think that it would have benefited to have that option when we were working on it. But just when we wanted to acknowledge the limitations that we ran into and that others might run into when they're trying to make correlations between a large amount of things that are being sent to interlibrary alone, especially if they have put limits on how users interact with AGS. Here are some of our references that particularly the period price survey and the paper that we just published on this project that we did. So if you want more information, feel free to look into these. And that's it for us. We'll open it to questions. And if we're not able to get to everyone's questions, our contact info is in the slides.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Cindy and Darius, our first question from the Q&A, how did AGS compare with ILL on a per request basis?
Cindy, do you want to answer this or you want me to go ahead?
No, you do it.
Okay, so overall, we did see a larger volume in with interlibrary loan, even though over the past few years our interlibrary loan requests have been steadily going down. That might change with the new system that we just migrated to, but overall, interlibrary loan still had more requests than AGS, but we think that's just because that we've had that 3-year limit that we placed on it was, users were finding resources outside of that, and so they were being rerouted to interlibrary loan to request those things. So I do think that if we didn't have any restrictions, AGS would meet or go have more greater requests than our interlibrary loan.
Okay, our next question. Thanks so much for this presentation. Could you say more about how you scoped access to different patron groups? We have AGS and worked with our Office of Identity and Access Management to identify existing groups to take users to AGS or redirect to ILL after single sign-on authentication, depending on whether they were a part of a group that was permitted to access AGS or not. But if there are other ways to do this, I would be really interested to hear more since we're kind of limited with our user groups. Thank you.
Um, so, oh, Cindy, I'll let you take this.
Darius, you can jump in. I was just going to say that we did not limit to user group. What we did limit to was how many times a user could download from a journal. So we put the limits on the journals at 10 uses for a journal. And then we look at it periodically to reset. We had a couple of, enthusiastic users, shall we say, who like to use it a lot. And so we did not limit it to specific user groups. Now, I don't think that this will stay the way it is now. I think we might have to move to a model where at some point where we limit to, say, faculty only. But Darius, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so outside of what the access that we have in AGS to really target specific users, we have user groups that are set up at the university levels that we can control within our discovery layer and only have it show up for certain groups. So if we only wanted it to show up to the faculty user group, we could scope it down to the faculty user group and not have it show up for undergraduates or, graduate students. So while AGS doesn't have that control, we have more control over that through our library system and how and where we display the link and display the open form link. We control that at the library system level. Unfortunately, unless you set up a lot of your user groups in AGS, you are kind of limited. But in our instance, we didn't want to limit anyone, but if we did, we would do it more at our user groups within our banner system to kind of mitigate who can see and have access to AGS, kind of like what you did. Um, let's see.
All the systems have to talk to each other, and figuring that out is a challenge, I'm sure. Yeah. Our next question, what is the pricing model? Were there articles from particular publishers that are more expensive, or is it a flat AGS fee?
Oh, there is a flat sort of usage fee. So there's a flat amount that you pay for every article, but this is an interesting. There the wide variety of what publishers charge for each article is relatively wide open. So that's kind of interesting. We haven't limited yet, but I will say that there is there's a wide difference between an article that is, they're costing $30 versus $120.
Yeah.
And you do wonder if the researchers figure that out and then they just request the ones that are expensive. Um, so as they get more savvy, maybe we'll see that trend. But yeah, there is a wide variety of costs. So that's why I was really focused on cost containment options, because we've had experiences with other vending options where the cost could really go out of control if you don't have those containment options. So they do have that option to limit things. So
Okay, another one on money. We are all thinking about money at this point. Do you have any data on the costs of AGS versus ILL?
no, but that would be an interesting research study to look at. We know, unless you had, Darius, did you look at any of that when you were pulling the data?
No, something to I guess I should mention is that our resource sharing department used to be a part of our department within our organization, but has been split off. So it's into another department. So that data has to be pulled and requested through another department now. And we just haven't had the chance to sit down with them and talk about, costs costs looking at AGS versus interlibrary loan.
Yeah, I would venture to say it's probably more expensive to go with AGS all the time for everything than ILL. But we had some requests from faculty groups from our health sciences in particular, because you could literally spend your entire budget on health sciences and not even get everything that you needed. And so it's hard to balance all of those things when you have a lot of considerations to think through in a large university with lots of needs. And so, yeah, that's but that would be interesting to compare for sure.
Okay, and another one in the Q&A. Could you say more about adding AGS into EBSCOhost? What was that process like? And can you tell us how much it's used?
So I can tell you that I can't tell you where I'm looking into a way to track how much it's used because the way that we set it up is that EBSCO at the admin level just and also like ProQuest, they have a way that you can set up custom links that really that can open URL out to certain situations. So we created a custom link in it's similar to the link that when you go to databases that say find it find this article and people see their logo of their school. It's similar to that, except it'd be like the AGS logo. Um, we're looking into ways, and this goes back to when we were looking at things that are being redirected to the interlibrary, ways to tell where people are coming from and how they're getting access to AGS. And we have had conversations with, and they're adding more robust analytics on the back end of Article Galaxy Scholar, figuring out ways that how users are getting to this tool outside of we redirected it to interlibrary alone, or we purchased, or we sent them to open access. So it's really just that's the next process, is getting more analytics that we can drill down into. But setting it up in EBSCOhost is like setting up your link resolver for going to your library catalog. Once you get the custom linking working and you can open a ticket with AGS or your EBSCOhost, the AGS team is very active. When you ask them for anything, they look into it immediately. So with them, we were able to just get everything set up, and it wasn't very difficult.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna vamp for a little bit, theater term, sorry. See if any other questions roll in. We appreciate everyone coming to this session and for being a part of this conference. All right, Cindy and Darius, thank you so much. It was really informative, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their day, regardless of which time zone you're in and what awaits you.
Thank you.